We've got some arm wrestling on the programme for you, not between me and Flo. This is between the government, in fact, and the trade unions. Unions vowing to stage a new demonstration. This is tomorrow, isn't it, Flo, against the government's controversial labour reforms.
That's right. I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record.
Yes,
We're talking about this every day now. The government has threatened to ban these protests that are scheduled for tomorrow. And then it said, no, these demonstrations can take place so long as they're static and not in movement. Now, trade unions are outraged. And for now, it's unclear exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. Les Echos is reporting that despite all this uncertainty and tension, people are trying to see the situation with humor. Some have taken to social media saying that maybe tomorrow's demonstrations are going to turn into a game of grandmother's footsteps. It's called Un, deux, trois, soleil. You know, someone, the cat turns around and then you have to move, and when they turn around, you freeze. So maybe that's what the demonstrations are going to look like tomorrow.
Not everyone's laughing, though, are they? I mean, the government's drawn quite a lot of criticism for trying, or threatening anyway, to ban these protests.
That's right. If we stay with Les Echos, they interview a specialist in social protests. You can see a photo of her here, Danielle Tartakoski. She says that banning protests is an exceptional measure that's been used less than 1% of the time since the beginning of the 1970s. So you can see it's a very rare occasion. And she wonders if banning or threatening to ban these protests is going to fix the problem or rather exacerbate it. And she says, I, for one, believe that it's like throwing oil on the fire.
Yeah, you found, haven't you, that papers right across the political spectrum really seem to be against any kind of protest ban.
That's right. In some papers, it's unsurprising. Let's start with the communist paper L'Humanité. It's outraged over this threat coming from the government. The right to protest is a fundamental right in a democracy. You can see they're talking about how this is an infringement on the rule of law, and this editorial accuses the government of authoritarianism. But what's interesting is if we look at the other side of the political spectrum, L'Opinion, that's actually a pro-business paper, that it must be said is actually in favor of this controversial government reform, but it's also outraged that the government is threatening to ban protests. Despite everything, the right to protest is a fundamental right. It's a question of principle. It's a principle that hasn't been put into question for decades. And L'Opinion wonders what in the world has led the government to paint itself into this crazy corner. How in the world can it imagine that threatening to ban a protest would even fly in any way? Les Echos, if we go back to that paper one more time and look at their editorial, says that, you know, the labor reform is really turning into a slow poison for the government. It seems to be caught in its own trap.
Going to take you now to the left-leaning paper Libération. They're saying that the Socialist Party as a whole has been suffering because of these labour protests.
That's right. Let's take a look at the front page of Libération today. You can see it says that the Socialist Party is paying the bill. And that photo you can see there is the photo of a local chapter of the Socialist Party. Local offices have been vandalized. Socialist activists have been insulted. Libération says that, you know, as the left tears itself apart, anger against the government is turning violent against the party itself. And the party is bearing the brunt. It's kind of the punching bag for the government. And Libé has a very interesting report on the ground, because this is really happening across the country. And Libération reports that a lot of these grassroots socialist activists feel like it's really unfair because they themselves have been demonstrating against the government's labor code reform. So they feel like it's unfair for them to be targeted because they're not even in favor of what the government's doing. Libé is very concerned by this trend and says it's very dangerous when a party as a whole is targeted. And what's interesting is Libération has very harsh words for the vandals in general. Libé has been supporting the protest movement, but it's very harsh about the vandals and says that this policy that they're putting forward of random violence really undermines democracy.
So a very tense social climate really here in France. The country also on high alert because of the threat of terrorism. The head of France's intelligence agency is really sounding the alarm now.
That's right. Now, comments he made to Parliament are getting a lot of attention. You can read about it in Le Figaro. This is Patrick Calvar. He's the head of the DGSI. You can see there, that's the Direction Générale de la Sécurité Intérieure. It's basically in charge of counter-espionage, counter-terrorism. Now, he recently spoke to members of parliament and painted a really alarming picture. You can see the quote there, France is on the verge of a civil war. Now, this quote, as I said, is all over the press today. He essentially said that there's a real risk of fighting between various communities in France, and this could spiral into a general confrontation. And all it would take would be another terrorist attack, a couple terrorist attacks, because the situation is so tense.
Finally, Flo, papers also focusing on the fate of Charlie Hebdo. It's a year and a half now, almost, isn't it, since that terrorist attack on the satirical magazine's headquarters.
That's right, and Charlie Hebdo is back in the saddle again, according to Libération. Now, it says that the satirical magazine has reached some stability after a very chaotic period, as you can imagine. But there's still a lot of tensions surrounding Riz, the magazine's editor-in-chief. Now, he's been accused of being obsessed with Islam and the far right, but he defends himself and says that these are real topics of interest. And in fact, that's what readers want Charlie Hebdo to talk about. It's kind of their trademark in a way. And so that's why he's delivering to readers, well, some readers, because Libé reports that a lot of people who subscribed to Charlie Hebdo in the wake of the accidents have actually canceled their subscription. 2/3, in fact, have canceled their subscription since 2015.
Flo, thank you very much. Flo Villeneuve there with the papers here on France 24. In the next half hour, a second major vote for the Scottish. This is what the country wants to belong to, of course, because after the Scottish independent vote less than 2 years ago, now there's the EU referendum. We have a special report from Scotland in the next half an hour.